I'm Carrie Adams, and you're listening to Carrie's Connoisseurs, coming to you from Solid Gold Podcasts. Here we talk to the movers and shakers, the drinkers, the dreamers, and all the people who make it happen in the liquor and luxury industries from around the world. Well, hello everybody, and welcome to Carrie's Connoisseurs. I feel like it's forever since I did this. Jason, when last did I do it? I don't even know. Anyway, today we're welcoming Christo Le Riche into the studio because last week I was privileged enough to have some dinner with Christo and team in Johannesburg for the launch of your new vintages. Christo, hi.
Hi, Carrie. Thank you for having me on the show. It's nice to be back after a year.
I know it is, because it was this time last year that we were doing last year's releases. Hey.
Yes. I've still got my coffee cup sitting here in the kitchen. I drink coffee out of it every day.
Do you? Good boy. Okay. For anybody who doesn't know, I think I'm joined by most people in the South African wine industry, and in fact probably the international wine industry, in saying that Le Riche Cabernet is our foremost Cabernet in the country. I know that's a very sweeping, bold statement, and I'll probably get shot down in flames by a lot of people, but I'll be supported by most. You do make the best Cabernet in the country, as far as I'm concerned, as did your father. And so there's a legacy of Cabernet that comes from Le Riche. And we've just released, we'll talk about them, but we tasted the 2023 Chardonnay, the 2023 Richesse, which is a lovely blend which everybody needs to know about. And then there's a sort of a host of Cabernets punctuated by the Reserve Cabernet, which is just sublime. So let's start with the 2023 vintage. Remind us what that vintage was like, Christo. Hot,
so
cold,
23
rainy.
is... Yeah, well, it's perceived as this rainy, wet season, but I think it gives you a very good example of how people are like goldfishes. We just don't have a very long memory at times, and I think there's a space where we need to remember that for 2023, it only really started to rain from about, I think it was the 7th of March that we got our big 20 mils of rain, and that they never stopped raining.
Yeah.
Before that, we had a very good and actually early season. Our winter ended quite early in 2022. We had nice rains through that winter period. Spring was good, very good flowering. So there was a lot of fruit, berries on the fruit. And that initial phase of the growing season was warm. We had a rain thunderstorm. I think it was mid-December, which is ideal timing for going into veraison when the berries change color. And then we had a second rainstorm that came in again at, I think it was mid-February. And so the timing was perfect. I was actually really looking forward to the vintage and to see what the quality was going to be in the lead up. And then that beautiful weather that we had actually also made it a very early vintage. So we started picking our Cabernets on the 20th of February. Now, to put that in context,
That's hell of an early for Cab.
It's very early. It's 2022 vintage. We started picking on the 5th of March. So there's a significant difference between those two, and just the quality of fruit, or not the quality of fruit, but there's a significant difference in timing of 15 days between 2023 and 2022. But I think the quality of 23 is there, but if we had old vineyards with a lot of virus, or if you're in areas where it's very, very late ripening, then you would have struggled with the vintage.
Okay. So from the tasting of the wines that we did the other night, I mean, there's no such thing really as a horrible Le Riche Cabernet for me. But one of the wines that did stick out hugely, like a big dog's you-know-what's, was your Chardonnay. Your 2023 Chardonnay is just delicious. What happened with Chardonnay that is it just developing Christo's disappeared from my screen, is that right? No. Oh, he's back. Sorry, Christo,
I
you
think
disappeared there for a minute.
I've got a little bit of buffering, so I'm also running slightly behind. It seems.
Are you?
I can hear you clearly, so that's not a problem.
Okay, yeah, I can hear you as well. So you can just cut that bit out. So, Christo, the Chardonnay, tell me about it. Is it just developing your character, or are you more familiar with your vineyards, or why is it just feeling so much comfier and so much lovelier than what it was?
Look, I won't put myself out there as the best Chardonnay winemaker in South Africa. There's a lot of guys that I really look up to that are doing some great stuff. That said, I did learn how to make Chardonnay from it was at Thelema, so under Giles Webb. I learned from Peter Finlayson.
We can't really go wrong with that, can you?
Yeah, I learned from Carl Schultz with Hartenberg, and I worked with David Finlayson at Glencarlo. So from a Chardonnay production point of view, the knowledge is there. But I have to be honest, I don't think in practice, I never did volume production of my own. But I also think we changed the style of our Chardonnay in 2020. We went from a wine that was 50% tank fermented, much more crisp, no second fermentation on it, to a wine where we just felt that the expression of that Chardonnay wasn't with the way we interpreted Stellenbosch. Stellenbosch makes beautiful Chard, whether you're up on the high altitude slopes and going above 400 meters above sea level, or if you're down at the coastal side, which is our Chardonnay expression, where you've got that beautiful sea impact coming in of False Bay. I think there's some really interesting sites where Chardonnay really can shine in this area. But we're always going to have a little bit more fruit. It's going to be a softer tannin structure. Or sorry, not tannin structure. Obviously, talk too much about Cabernet. It's got a softer acidity. And for me, it's about expressing the beautiful fruit that Chardonnay can have. But we need to retain acidity so that that lovely richness that we have doesn't become too much. And that's where we did a kind of a refocus on it. And I think I'm definitely getting better at making Chardonnay as the years move on. But also the block is getting older.
You speak about... yes, well, the vineyards are getting older, but you speak about Stellenbosch Chardonnay. The fruit comes exclusively from Stellenbosch, doesn't it? Where is the vineyard that Chardonnay comes from?
So this vineyard is coming from our core producers. So about 25% of our production comes from a farm called Eendracht Farm in the very south of Stellenbosch. It's owned by the Steyn family, and it's a single vineyard that's now, I think the block is 10 years old. It was planted in 2017.
Oh, it's perfect.
So it's a really young little block, which I manage the whole viticulture on it, and we've only got 8 rows. We do very small volumes. We only do 500 cases of Chardonnay, but it's something special.
I know you spent the whole night last week. You spent the whole night telling me that you only had a few of everything, which is not really what a retailer wants to hear.
Hey, I didn't say I've got too few of everything. Everything is there in sufficient volume.
Everything's tiny, Christo.
Well, no one's really challenged me and shown me that they want more. No, so that's not true.
Wait.
I know you're pulling my leg here, but no, we're doing a big effort in making more. But the Chardonnay is always going to be small volume because that's where I want it to be. One of those.
Okay, so let's tell them. Let's tell them what your Chardonnay tastes like. Because I think it tastes quite a lot like Meursault, but it's not as buttery as Meursault. It's rich, but it's not buttery. But it's just very Meursault-ish for me, which I love. That's how I love Chardonnay to be. So it's textured and it's layered and it's rich, but it's not overly oaked. The application of oak is very, very hardly even noticeable. And I think that maybe... You told me that you're using some amphora and some oak, are you?
Yes, so we do a full spontaneous fermentation on the wine, 100% malolactic, and that's where that richness in the palate comes from. But I don't do any sulfur addition for the first 6 months, which then retains freshness. So there's none of that butteriness that comes through in the wine. And then from an aging point of view, we have the 30% amphora component, again, to retain freshness and acidity on it. But I do work with about 50% older barrels and about 25% new oak. So there's a nice big dollop of new oak. But if you use the correct barrels and you retain it well, the Chardonnay can absorb that oak flavor, because you never want to taste crank on a
There's
wine.
Definitely enough. No, and there's definitely enough fruit in your Chardonnay grapes to have handled whatever oak you threw at it. So it's gorgeous, guys. You need to go and buy some. Is it available, that 2023? Is it available in the stores now?
It's available Celador. So that's going to be your best place to find it. It's not really in any retail shops.
You don't put it into retailers. It's not enough, is it?
No, at 450 cases, it's not. It's not the kind of wine. So we first and foremost release it to our private mailing list, and then we also make it available to people who come and taste with us. And if you're lucky enough to enjoy a dinner with us, then the Chardonnay is always a great welcome drink to start off the evening of drinking great Cabernet.
I know, it's lovely. So then we tasted Riche, which is it really punches above its weight, that little one. But interestingly enough, you've changed the blend a little bit on Riche, hey? We put a much bigger splash of Cinsault in there.
Yeah, and I think we're now much closer to where we want to be that wine. The Riche has always been for us a wine where we look at the history of blending other varieties into Cabernet, with Cabernet and Stellenbosch. Initially, it started out as a Bordeaux-style blend, but we wanted to look further back. We wanted to go back to where we were in the 50s and the 60s, and that was doing 75% Cabernet to 25% Cinsault. There was no Merlot, there was no Cab Franc, there was no Petit Verdot in the country. And those wines have aged so well. And we kind of threw the baby out with the bathwater, because when Merlot came in, Cinsault went out. And it went from 30% of the plantings, majority red grape in Stellenbosch in 1979, to only 2% by 1989. And we didn't put another hectare in the ground for 20 years after that. And so we've actually
if we're all being fair, Christo, and I'll probably get into trouble for this as well, Merlot is not really such a, how should I say it? Merlot needs to sort of man up a bit for me at this stage of the game. Cinsault has got such amazing longevity potential. It really has. I can still hear you, but I can't see you anymore. Okay. We just keep chatting. It'll come back. There you are. So Cinsault is a much nicer bed partner, I think, for your Cabernet, for Riche than Merlot. You do still put a little bit of Merlot in, though, don't you?
No, there's only a splash of Cab Franc going in. And that's for acidity. But there's no more Merlot, no more Petit Verdot. And I think, look, there's a very strong argument to be made for Cabernet and Merlot going together. I think the French were on something when they put those two together.
They're great bed partners.
But I think from a South African point of view, for me, Cabernet and Cinsault is us. It feels much more much more at home. It's what we've been working for with all the years. Cinsault always went into our brandies way back when, and we know how much we love our brandies. But I think
it makes wine that tastes like cold drink. Makes wine that tastes like cold drink. It does, which we quite like in South Africa. We drink it like cold drink.
Yeah. So I think Cinsault and Cabernet together it's unique. It's us. It expresses South Africa. It expresses Stellenbosch. I grew up drinking those wines. Those were the first red wines that my palate was introduced. It's probably a little bit underage drinking, but when my dad was still at Rustenburg in the 80s, I was drinking Cabernet Cinsault. That was the first reds that I was introduced. And my dad used that wine to convince me because it was so soft. Cinsault softens out the tannins of Cabernet. And that for me is where they become such a beautiful bed partner. You've got a wine that is not as big and powerful as Cabernet is. It's got elegance to it. And that's why we've gone to upping the Cinsault component, upping the Cabernet component. And then just for spice and acidity, we add a splash of Cabernet Franc. But I think the
But
wine
now,
is much closer.
Christo, having said that you've upped the Cinsault content, where are you finding it? Because there's not that much Cinsault around, is there? Or have you planted somewhere?
No, we've been working with the old block Cinsault since 2014. The block was planted in 1973. It's planted in pure alluvial sand wash on a deep clay bank somewhere down. I don't even know where the clay bank is. But I know it's there because the vineyard survived the droughts of 2015 to 2019. Dry land, it just kept doing its thing. And it's one of those blocks where I don't try too hard to change it. And don't mess around with the family who farms it for too much, because they've been on that site for 6 generations. And their style of farming has made this block survive up until today. So we are working a little bit more with cover crops and things. But other than that, I let the block do its thing. And if we don't mess it up viticulturally, which we shouldn't, I'll hopefully be able to work with this block for another 50 years, ideally. It's going to take some work to get it that old, but that's kind of the idea. But that's all I have. Old vine Cinsault is really hen's teeth in Stellenbosch. And there's not a lot of new young Cinsault going in either. And as I mentioned, we haven't planted anything for 20 years. So there's no up and coming old vineyards either. So we've got old and we've got new, and there's nothing in between. So
guys, if you want something really delicious, Riche's 2023 is a blend that is under 300 Rand a bottle. And it's just honestly delicious. You can open it and glug it, and you can pretend to be fancy because it says Le Riche, but you don't have to pay huge amounts of money for a seriously smart wine. So that was that. And then we did Cabernet 2023, just your backbone of your sort of portfolio, really, which is your straight cab. Because then we can go on to speak about your little fancy schmancy single vineyard cabs that you've got, which we love. But your bog standard Le Riche Cabernet 2023, which is what you would buy if you went into a store and asked for a bottle of Le Riche Cab. I'm sure that's what they'd give you. And that's also, about 400-500 Rand a bottle or something. I mean, it's not a huge amount of money. Yeah. Or is it 600 Rand a bottle? I don't know. But it's not a huge amount of money for the pedigree that it reveals. Where do you get those grapes from?
So
everywhere.
We've always, you can say everywhere within Stellenbosch. We've always worked with fruit from a variety of producers. My dad, leaving Rustenburg, he took his retirement fund and started the business. So there was no money to buy land in Stellenbosch. There's no money to buy land in Stellenbosch. So we've got long-term relationships.
It's never going to be money to buy land in Stellenbosch. Never.
No, unless you're in some other industry. You're not going to make that money in the wine trade.
No.
But we've got long-term relationships. So as I said, our biggest producer, the Steyn family, we've been working with since 1997. And I've worked with about 14 farmers through about 22 different vineyards, coming off the Simonsberg, Jonkershoek, Northern Helderberg Coastal, Bottleray. So really trying to find a multitude of sites, with each site giving me a unique expression of Stellenbosch Cabernet. And then we put those together. So we've got 3 wines that we produce, between the Richesse, our classic Cabernet, and the Reserve. And each has got a different face and a different expression of Stellenbosch. But no, they're not single terroir expressions. They're there that if you want to taste what Stellenbosch Cabernet tastes like, my classic Cabernet should be the benchmark. And if you pick up a glass, you must be able to say, from anywhere in the world, you've got to be able to recognize it as that is Stellenbosch Cabernet.
So those other cabs, they're not other cabs, the ones that have like a Yonkers Hook and a Bostock and all of those, do you still bottle those? So and you put that on the label?
Yes, so those are all part of our kind of more, let's call them an experimental series that we do. It's cellar releases, so you won't really see them out and about in a bottle shop. You'll need to come and contact us directly or look at our website. But they're there to, there isn't really, you can go and taste an estate Cabernet. throughout Stellenbosch. But if you do, you're going to see the interpretation of, say, the Kanonkop interpretation, or the Rissenfrede interpretation, or the Neil Ellis interpretation of Jonkershoek and Helderberg and Simonsberg. But you can't really compare Simonsberg and Helderberg because they're not coming from the same winemaker, and neither is the same winery. And that's why we brought out the series, because it's there to showcase the diversity of Cabernets that we have. There's such an interesting story to tell. And I taste that on a daily basis in our individual blocks that we have in the cellar. And we just wanted to showcase that diversity that there is. So every vintage we do something different. Some years we'll bring out 2 or 3 single vineyards. Other years we'll put maybe two vineyards together. The one year we did an ocean and a mountain blend to showcase ocean-influenced Cabernet versus more mountain, high up on the mountain slopes influenced Cabernets. And it's really just by giving you those different expressions of Stellenbosch and how what Stellenbosch looks like. But it's all small bottlings. They're 300 to 600 bottles each. And it's really unique wine and an interesting.
You see, there we go again. There we go again. We've only got 300 bottles. What are we going to do with that, Christo? We need more than 300 bottles of anything. I can drink 300 bottles on my own. We've spoken about those. Before I get to the reserve, which really is the piece de resistance, I need you to tell everybody about the Vogelsang, because I hadn't tasted that before, and it's gorgeous, and I don't think we'll ever see it again. Tell us about it.
No, so that's another one of these little small bottlings that we did, where I looked at, we wanted to see how far we can push the quality boundary of Cabernet and Cinsault. Our Richesse is made because of its accessibility and the drinkability that Cabernet and Cinsault can bring. But we felt that there was a space where we could look at, like, how good can this blend really be? And we looked back at those wines from the 60s and the 50s. And that ratio was 75% Cabernet to 25% Cinsault. That's something my dad also used to use. It was a very scientific ratio that came from years of development, where they realized that your pump cannot pump Cabernet. So if you throw 3 crates of Cabernet to 1 crate of Cinsault, the Cinsault gives you enough juice so that the pump can pump the Cabernet.
Okay, so it was really well researched that it was born out of necessity.
Lots of tasting and frustration with a pump that gave them that answer. But, we did this in 2014 and 15. So when we started working with Cinsault in the cellar, we did two vintages to see what the quality would look like. We used 2 blocks of reserve blocks of Cabernet to our old block of Cinsault. And then we put it in our cellar for 9 years before we released them. So that went out onto our private mailing list. It's still available cellar door as well. So if you are interested in that wine, it's a really fun wine. It's already aged. And it's, really, really delicious wine for drinking.
It's gorgeous, and it's quite capital intensive as a wine farmer to age a bottle for 9 years for the customer. You know, I come with a French sort of approach to this. You need to take half of the responsibility for aging and then toss it onto the end user and make him sit on it for the next 10 years. You know,
well,
so
look,
just teach your father business 101.
Well, that's why we only do it in small volume.
Yeah, it's gorgeous, guys. That Vogelsang, get onto that website, because I'm sure there's only 20 bottles left at this stage of the game. And, you know, with the Le Riches, you have to get in quick. If you can get some Vogelsang, it's beautiful wine. It's highly recommended. So do that. And then we sort of move on to the reserve cabin. Yes.
Just hold on a second quickly. Francois. Yeah. Sorry. There's just a background noise that's coming through. Okay, all done. We can go on.
Okay. Christo, the reserve, which is really why it makes you rich and famous, and it is velvety and silky and smooth and berryful and beautiful, and it honestly is. For me, the background noise sounds like cows with cowbells on them, Christo. What's going on at Le Riche?
Yeah. Yeah. Sorry about that.
It's fine. It's fine. It's a farm. The Le Riche Reserve is something extraordinary. What do you do differently with the reserve to make it fripple the price and fripple the taste and fripple the mouthfeel? Tell us.
Well, that's kind of my little trade secret. But
okay, you don't have to reveal all. Just take your pants can go down to your ankles. You don't have to take them right off.
I don't even want to see that view. Our whole cellar and everything we do is set up to make the reserve. The reason we have the Richesse in the range and the reason we have the Cabernet, our classic Cabernets in the range, is because those are all there to support the viticulture. In other words, I need a certain critical mass of vineyards to be able to have a vineyard base that includes younger and older blocks in them. It needs to include all those different regions, as we've discussed earlier. And so within that basis, and the great advantage of if you're buying in fruit, you don't have to take in a bad block. So there isn't a block in my cellar that doesn't have the potential to go into the reserve. But some years, certain regions do better. Other wards do better. Some years, I'll have a 4-year-old block that's in the cellar, and I know it's going to get into the reserve in time, but it'll take about 5 years to get there. Other years, I've had a block that has been going into the reserve for many years. But, for example, a year like 2023, the old blocks did not perform. But in a year like 2024, those old blocks absolutely stood out and they shined. So to be able to make the reserve, which inherently is a selection of the very best of what we have in our cellar, I need our classic Cabernet and I need our Richesse, because they're all there and supporting it. And they all have got components of the reserve going into them. But the reserve is first and foremost a viticultural blend of the very best of the vineyards that we have in our portfolio. Secondly, there's a lot more attention to detail in the cellar. We do longer extended maceration where the grapes sit and soak on the skins. So even going up to 24 days. Where they sit and just kind of macerate and develop more flavor. And then because they've been on the skins for longer, there's more tannin, there's more structure. We need to use more new oak. And new oak, unfortunately, comes at a significant price. So you're looking at north of 20,000 Rand a barrel. And we use the small barrels, 2 to 5 liters. So there's only 300 bottles coming out of a barrel. And what that oak does is that it lets a lot of oxygen in, and you only get that in the first year that you use that barrel. But that oak and the oxygen that comes in from that barrel locks in flavor, it locks in fruit, and it highlights and accentuates fruit. And that is really where the new oak plays a big role. And then from there out, it softens and it knits that big tannin structure. So by the time that we're done in 2 years' time, the wine is already soft, approachable, and delicate, but it has the inherent structure to be able to age for a very, very long time. And that is what, for me, classic Cabernet is all about. It's a wine that has nuance and delicacy and length on the palate, but if you forget about it in your cellar in good aging conditions, you'll be rewarded in 10, 15, 20, 25 years' time. And that is really what makes Cabernet such an amazing...
So if I come to visit you at Le Riche and I walk into your cellar, you've got all your Cabernets from the different vineyards in different barrels, clearly. And that's exactly where the reserve comes from. So you and your dad and your sister sit down and you decide on the reserve blend. When?
So that's
when do you
about
decide
a year
on
into
it?
the process. Young Cabernet is a very tough thing to taste. I actually don't like tasting my wines for the first year because I often freak out and I want to run out the door and quit my job and say,
I love it. I love them young.
Bad job.
I love them
but
young.
after about 10 months, I feel like it becomes drinkable. Now, if you love it young, then you've got some grip and experience to be able to handle that kind of tannin and structure that comes with young Cabernet.
Oh, it's gorgeous. You can pick it up like so.
Yeah, the fruit is locked in. You've got this beautiful perfume that's starting to show. The complexity is there. But you can also start to get a feel for where this wine is going. And then, we sit down and we start to taste. So we usually have, of the 22 vineyards we work with, we've got about at least 40 different parcels that we'll taste through. And it's a long, slow process. It takes about 3 months where we'll just keep tasting and blending and tasting and blending until we get to a final answer, which makes up a wine that we feel represents our house style. It represents the vintage. It represents the Stellenbosch terroir. But it also is the very best wine that we can make. And then it gets blended, goes into barrel for another about 10 to 12 months. And then we try and bottle unfined, unfiltered, and give it a year in bottle before we release it.
And do you sort of make the same amount of reserve min of meer, every year?
It can fluctuate quite a lot. So 2019, because it was such a tricky vintage, we got some amazing fruit, but it wasn't every single block that was great. We were only able to make about 6,000 bottles. But at the moment, we're doing about 12,000 bottles of production. And hopefully, I've been working hard the last 6 years to get expand our vineyard base. We'll be able to get a little bit more into the bottle going forward. So that's really our long-term goal. Because 12,000 bottles is nothing, and there is just not enough to go around. And it's sad not to be able to give people the wine if they want it.
And Christo, if we were to advise a serious cellar holder, what do you think your optimum drinking age is of your reserve? What do you think the optimum age should be?
I would say start drinking anything from about 8 to 10 years old. And from there on, it depends on how you like your wine. If you prefer them younger with more structure, I would say drink it at 8 years old. If you're like the English and you like them really old and vinegary, then give it 30 years and you're going to get amazing results at a much, much older period. And
if you're like me... If you're like me, I would tell everybody to start drinking them immediately and continue drinking them for the rest of their life. So just buy a case and start drinking them, because they are actually drinkable the day you put them in that bottle. They're so beautiful. They're so soft. They've got such soft, polished tannins that you don't have to wait forever to drink Le Riche wines. They do benefit from a couple of years in the cellar. But you don't have to wait if you don't want to. If you simply can't wait, I can't. Even if I drink 2 bottles and keep 4 for the next 10 years, but you have to have some. You can't just sit and look at it for 10 years, can you?
Yeah, especially I think when you look at the 22 vintage, it's one of those vintages where the wine has got so much just luscious fruit.
I know.
It is approachable. It's got lovely, soft, bright tannin. It really is a vintage like 2020 where you want to drink them younger. And there's a beautiful expression when it's young. It's going to get better with age, but it's delicious it is at the moment. So I would definitely recommend, as we were chatting about this as well, if you have a case of 6, I would say drink 4 now, age 2. Where 21, I would say...
I'd say drink 6. I'd say drink 6 and buy another case.
Oh, that's also a good option. That's why you're on the sales side of things.
Christo, that 2022 Reserve Cabernet Sauvignon is a triumph. It's absolutely beautiful. I don't know. I haven't tasted much from 2022. Having said that, I suppose I have, but yours is honestly really, really smart. Everything that I tasted last week was gorgeous. Tell your father that whatever he did, he got the recipe right, because you're doing it a whole lot better. Well, we won't say better than him, different than him. I think you've made great strides on the viticultural side of Le Riche, and you're making such a difference. You're so clever when it comes to site-specific things, and specifically Stellenbosch. I've got a big thing in my heart that I want to make a special category called Super Stellenbosch. I've said it 100 times. And when we do end up with a Super Stellenbosch, like you get a Super Tuscan, we've got Super Stellenbosch. That's what it should be. And there are a couple of wines that specifically come to mind when you're talking about Super Stellenbosch. It's like Antinori, he's got a couple of those Super Tuscans. There's thousands of wines that come out of Tuscany, But then there are super Tuscans as well. And that's what we need to start doing in Stellenbosch. And Le Riche is definitely on that list for me. Yeah. So thank you very, very much, my darling boy. It was lovely having dinner with you. It was lovely seeing you. I hope to see you soon in Johannesburg again. I've been in touch with
I'll be out for the Cape Winemakers Guild, all the functions involved there. So that'll be my next trip.
Okay, fabulous. I'll see you then. And anybody who hasn't got some of the 200 bottles of wine that he's got left, rush and buy it, because it's going to disappear and you're going to feel sorry for yourself. There are only 200 or 300 of everything, guys. So just make sure you get one of the 300. You look so dumbfounded, Christo. Thank you so much for joining me. Lots and lots of love, and enjoy the rest of your day. Bye.
Another production from Solid Gold Podcasts.